Welcome to MilSpouse Matters, the podcast dedicated to encouraging military spouses. Need some inspiration as you navigate military life, moves, deployments, raising military kids, keeping your marriage together, career issues, and more? Get an encouraging, humorous outlook from a spouse who's been there for 30 years. Join host Jen McDonald, author of You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, who knows that we're stronger together. Jen also writes regularly for outlets such as Military Spouse Magazine and has been featured in numerous books and national publications. Grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and sit back and relax as Jen talks with military spouses both new and experienced who will give you realistic hope and support for your own MilSpouse journey.
Hey everyone, this is Jen. Welcome to the MilSpouse Matters podcast, episode 30. Woohoo! We just hit the year mark, the year anniversary of the podcast. I released it last September, kind of went past without me realizing or marking it in some way. So I am going to do a giveaway of 3 signed copies of my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, which is a 30-day devotional. And I'll do that in the next week or so. So look for that on the MilSpouse Matters Instagram and Facebook. And just a reminder, if you do like the show, I hope you'll subscribe and leave a 5-star review rating on whatever podcast app you're using. And if you like a topic or think an episode might help somebody you know, or just want to share it on your social media, that is a great way to get the word out too. And I appreciate it so much. So connect with MilSpouse Matters on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and you can stay updated on what's coming and past episodes and other good information. You can also find show notes and the complete show archive at milspousematters.com. All you need to do is click on the podcast tab for easy buttons to subscribe. You can listen to all the past episodes right there on the site and get information on how to be a guest and more. If you're listening to this right when it's released, October 2019, pretty much full with guests for the next several months because I am rotating between solo episodes and guests. And since I'm only doing a couple per month, they do fill up quickly. And I'm looking for people with compelling stories and help for other military spouses, not necessarily businesses. I know I mentioned that before, but I do get a lot of requests for that. If your business is something that is unique and would be helpful to other military spouses, I will take a look at it, but that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for encouragement, inspiration, real stories from real military spouses. Also, milspousematters.com is also my author site. I have a lot of resources for you, like getting through the holidays during deployment, help for your military marriage, ideas for raising military kids, just a lot of things from years and years of writing. There's also a free deployment devotional. I think that's 5-day, just free download. All you need to do is put in your email to get it. And there's also a visual with Bible verses for military spouses and loads more. And also a link to the Christian Military Spouses Facebook group, or you can search on Facebook to join up with that. So drop me a note on Facebook or Instagram or email me at milspousematterspodcast@gmail.com. I really love hearing from you guys and just kind of hearing what's going on with you, what you're looking for, and maybe even just a reaction to an episode or how it helped you or things like that. I just love getting your notes. So I'm going to read you a couple of recent notes. It seems like a common theme, and we're going to talk about that more in just a moment. So I really do love hearing from you. I have heard a lot from a lot of you. The last episode with Tara Howes, episode 29, about making friends, finding friends as a military spouse, that really seemed to resonate with a lot of you, kind of just feeling like it's PCS season is over, you're somewhere new, or your friends just moved, or you're new, and trying to connect and find those meaningful connections with others. It seems to be kind of a lot of people are going through that. So really do appreciate hearing from you guys. And here are a couple of notes that I got recently. So this is from Kaylin on Instagram. And she said, "We moved to our current duty station 2 months ago and my husband just deployed. I have not had a chance to make friends yet. And when your episode came up today as a suggestion for me, I bawled like a baby. It was truly an act of God to have your podcast be about making friends during this time when I need someone so much. I just wanted to let you know that I am so inspired by you and beyond grateful for what you are doing for young military spouses. So thank you, Kaylin. I am so glad that it helped you as well. There is I think it's episode 18. And it's about when you've just moved and your spouse deploys, because definitely have been there. If you haven't listened to that one, I hope you will go take a listen and let me know what you think. So here's another note from Selena on Facebook, and she was active duty and is now a military spouse. And she says, thank you so much for this last episode about PCSing. I cried listening to it. Last summer, I was the last one left of my group, and I had such a hard time handling it. Weird how we grieve, even though it's not over a death. I lost myself for a minute, but pressed on like we have to. We just got to our new duty station in July, and I know I'm not alone, but some days it feels like it. I enjoyed listening to your show and will continue to do so. Being in the military was an awesome time in my life. Being a military spouse has been the hardest time thus far. Life is different and difficult. Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone. Again, thank you so much for reaching out. I truly do appreciate hearing from you guys. It just knowing that it helps you. I'm so grateful. And I think if you are a military spouse for any length of time, you can definitely relate to that. So how is your week? I would love to hear from you. Like I said, right now I am in Texas where I live, and we suddenly had fall hit from one day to the next. It was 90 something degrees. And then yesterday the high was 50. And I know that's not cold, but when you've had months of heat, it feels cold. We just had our daughter's wedding last weekend, so we're kind of recovering from that. And then I will be traveling to England next week with my youngest daughter for the Irish dancing Great Britain. I don't know the correct title. It's the Great Britain Championships. So that will be fun. If you are an Irish dance mom, let me know. I know there's a lot of us in the military, and it's kind of like its own little world too. But I digress. So some upcoming episodes I will be talking about some suggested resources for military spouses. So that will be other podcasts, books, magazines, things that will hopefully encourage you in your life. If there's something specific you think I should include or something you want to hear more about, let me know. I am also going to be doing some speaking at different groups. I will keep you guys posted on what's coming up. And if you would like for me to come speak to your group, again, I'm based in Texas. We can talk about that. And yeah, just keep me in mind, because my heart is to encourage military spouses. And I just love you guys so much. I think I will always feel a kinship with that community. As many of you know, our oldest son is also active duty. So my daughter-in-law is a military spouse. It's been a part of my life for 30 something years. And you guys are my heart. So let me know what I can do for you. So as I mentioned, one of the common themes I'm hearing from in person and through notes is this thought of when you feel alone. Life as a military spouse can be awesome and amazing. There are so many really cool opportunities. I think it is good to look at life positive and glass half full kind of thing. But let's just be honest, there are a lot of challenges as well. So Stacey Taylor, she was on episode 27 about military spouse friendships. I think we've done several about that now, but hers was about the importance of them and what being in community with others has meant to her. So I saw her post today on Instagram, and she put something about being at the laundromat to wash her big comforter and just how it reminded her of her earlier days. And I thought, I think that's something a lot of us older military spouses will never forget, what it felt like when we were young. And it just brought back this rush of memories from our first move together with my first move together with my husband. So I grew up in New Mexico, which if you've read my book, and I had always lived there. I grew up with my extended family around me. I had grandparents and aunts and uncles, and very idyllic as far as extended family went, and didn't even realize what I had until I left. Then we moved to Ohio to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, And no offense to anybody in Ohio, but it was in January and it was gray and it was freezing cold and I didn't know anybody and I had never lived somewhere where I didn't know anybody. So seeing Stacy's laundromat post just brought back this memory of we were living in this little furnished apartment. It's kind of cruddy. And I had to go take our laundry to a laundromat. And so let me just back up a little bit. I was a nurse. You know how it is when you roll into a duty station and your spouse automatically, they go to work, they have a community, it's just built in. Sort of like Selena said, it's challenging to be a military spouse because every time you move, you have to recreate your life again. Well, this was my first time doing this. I did not know how to do it. So I was a nurse and I hadn't found a job yet. So we were living in this crummy little furnished 1-bedroom. Well, I use the word bedroom very loosely. I think there was a curtain between the bed and the living room because we were young and didn't have a ton of money. And so we were renting this little apartment and I would take our laundry down to this kind of seedy laundromat. It was all very stereotypical. I spent hours at the laundromat. And so what I did was I would sit and write letters back home to my family because obviously this isn't back in the day before cell phones, etc. Yes, I'm old, but I would sit and write all these letters back and forth to my mom and dad. And my mother gave me a box of those recently. She kept them because she's a mom. And I can't even read through them all. It's embarrassing. Like I was so homesick and lonely and just, it had to be like everything in their power to just not come get me. But I know that they would encourage me back. I have all the letters from them as well. So things obviously got better. I found a job as a registered nurse at the local hospital. I met some people. We moved out of that crummy apartment into base housing. Kind of slowly, we were there for 4 years, settled in to life, found a community. And then 4 years later, we were moving. I think the realization that, I have to do this again and again and again. And over a total of about 13 moves, you're just never done. If your spouse stays in the military, you're just never done. And so sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes you don't find a great community. Sometimes you don't make a connection with a great friend. And we're going to talk about that too in just a minute. But one of the recurring themes in my life as a military spouse has been lack of control. Just when I think I have something figured out, everything changes. I know if you've listened to every episode, I talked to Kelly Artis and Claire Wood about the Enneagram, which is, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. It's a personality, what's the word? Which is sort of a typing thing to help you learn more about yourself and others. And one of the things I wish I would have known, because I would have so much anxiety about moves and about having to try to find people again and do it all over again, was as I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, I crave community. And so that's what gives me security. So when that's taken away, and I think most people probably feel this way, maybe some don't, but when that's removed and I have to start over again, that does just create a lot of issues for me. So whatever your comfort zone is, whatever that looks like for you, and you have to do it over again, just know you're not the only person that feels that way. It can seem like everybody else has it together and guess what? They're just faking it till they make it too. So hang in there. You are not alone. Today, I wanted to read a couple of sections to you. This really is just going to be a short episode of encouraging you if you're feeling alone and know that others have been there as well. So I had pulled out my book and thought I would read a couple of things to you just so that you can know that others relate. I have a chapter called Giving Up Control, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but just this little part. I'm just going to read a little part to you. So this is about when we had moved to Texas and we're living in a house that had just been built and we were having issues with scorpions. And then my husband, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but they were like in our house and we had 4 little kids. And then my husband was working a lot and then he was finishing his degree in the evenings. So I had stopped working as a nurse and I'm alone with the kids, which I loved being a stay-at-home mom, but things, had changed yet again. And so I was kind of working through that. So here we go. There were so many things I couldn't control. Due to a recent move and Steve's work schedule while he finished classes toward his degree, I found myself often alone. We both stayed exhausted, and most of my waking hours were spent with my young children. I loved being a stay-at-home mom, but the silence of the lonely evenings threatened to be my undoing. I was not in control of anything, and I like being in control. In the words of Jeff Manion, I'd found myself in the land between, that space where we feel lost or lonely or deeply hurt. But I hadn't realized that the land between is also fertile ground for our spiritual transformation and for God's grace to be revealed in magnificent ways. And those are the words of Jeff Manion, and that book is called The Land Between, and I will link to that. So I reached a point where I realized that my futile attempts at controlling my life, where we lived, our schedule, even how a given day would go, were just that, futile. Maybe you've reached that point in your own life. Perhaps it's something entirely different, and you think that battling a few scorpions would be a piece of cake in comparison to what you're dealing with. There are no quick fixes when it comes to surrendering your life to God's will and being okay with his answers, even if it's not what you'd prefer. I'm still walking through this, and I imagine I will be as long as I live. There are a few things I try to practice and remind myself as I work on loosening my tight grasp over circumstances I cannot control. Maybe they'll help you too. Here's a few things. So again, I'm not looking for a quick fix, but I thought I would just share with you some strategies that have helped me. Grab whatever moments you can find with God. As a Christian, I know the importance of seeking God each day. Yet if I didn't find time for a devotion or quiet time in the early mornings, it felt like it didn't count. Have you ever felt this way? I learned to snatch moments when I could, pondering a fragment of scripture as I nursed the baby, praying for my children and husband as I folded their laundry, and turning on uplifting music as a background to our day. Being honest. Do you know that God can handle your anger and questions? He already knows what you're feeling, so there is no sense in trying to hide it. The Bible is full of stories of people like David crying out to the Lord. Many of us have been raised to think that we must only come to God respectfully and quietly. While I am not inviting disrespect, I do believe that honest feelings brought up in times of prayer are good and even necessary. Not looking at every situation as a problem to be solved. There are some circumstances that just are. God needed to show and is still showing this control freak the limits of what I can actually control. I am independent and feisty by nature, and I am still learning the lesson that my fussing and nagging don't have the power to change anything other than making everybody else around me grumpy. Finding joy in the small things. When life is overwhelming, I remind myself of all that I have to be grateful for. Even if it's just one thing, can you find a bright spot in the midst of your trying circumstances today? Life didn't magically get better. But as time went on, I felt less of the old discontent and unhappiness rearing its ugly head within my spirit as I consciously built my own house of joy, thankfulness, and resting in God's will for my life. So here are a couple of verses. Turn to me and be gracious, for I am lonely. Psalm 25:16. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. And I know that not everybody listening to this is a Christian, but I do want to give those resources to those that it would help. So there's another chapter in my book that I thought I would share with you. And again, you can find that on my site or Amazon or even Barnes & Noble, places like that. And it's available on Kindle. And it's pretty easy reading. It's just 30 daily readings. And each section has a story from my life or somebody else's, sharing with you some tips and then usually several verses and a prayer. So I'm going to go ahead and read this whole one to you because I think this really applies to what we're talking about today about feeling alone as a military spouse. So this one is called Living in the Pause, Pause. Lead kindly light amid the encircling gloom. Lead thou me on. The night is dark and I am far from home. Lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet. I do not ask to see the distant scene. One step enough for me. And that is from a hymn by Cardinal John Henry Newman. Anonymous, raw, lost. Even though it had been a mere 2 years since our last military-mandated move, I'd nearly forgotten the feelings that would hit me on leaving a beloved location and slipping in quietly to the next. We were the new folks, again. Our family's 5th move in 6 years hit me hard, and some of it probably had to do with the culture shock of returning to the U.S. mainland after several years of consecutive overseas assignments. Along with the familiar unfamiliarity of our home country, we all felt the homesickness for places we knew we'd never stay permanently, and the now well-known to us feeling of life being on hold. Have you been there? As my teenage daughter and I strolled the streets of our new neighborhood one evening, We imagined aloud how different life would feel in a few months when we'd finally settled in our house and might have found important things like a church, hairdresser, and perhaps some friends. She remarked astutely, "It's as if our lives are on pause right now." I bet you understand this feeling. If you also find yourself in that strange transition time following a move, it can seem that everyone else is still going forward, including your spouse who's at a new job and meeting new people, while your own life has come to a standstill. It's a mixed blessing, this abrupt grinding to a halt of the too busy life we raced through a few weeks ago. We're forced to stop and reassess everything, whether we like it or not. And what we choose to include in our lives is now a choice, no longer a default. Embracing life in the pause requires stillness and a willingness to submit myself to God's will. As someone who would rather do than be still, these are not natural traits for me. How about you? But I found that the Lord has used these times of forced change to bring me clarity, teach me to think outside myself, and draw me closer to Him. Now, this is the section called Basic Training for Spouses. Embracing life in the pause isn't easy. Allow yourself to walk through each step in this process. Grieve what's lost. Glossing over the challenges of any huge change and referring to it as something our families must simply accept doesn't help anyone. Ultimately, we do eventually accept it because Uncle Sam said so. But allow your family and yourself time to grieve leaving behind beloved friends and places. Being transparent and letting your family know you're not immune to the love it, hate it feelings about military life may help them more than you realize. Be honest. Remember the good times, but be willing to move forward. This might be the hardest part for some of us because it's easy to look back with rose-colored glasses. Maybe you've just left the greatest assignment and said goodbye to the best friend you've ever had. Yes, cherish and maintain those friendships, but don't close yourself off to new experiences. On that note, don't compare. It's difficult not to compare what once was to what you seemingly face now. But circumstances are not always what they seem, and first impressions can be deceiving. A place you hate on first sight may turn out to be one of your best assignments. Look at this as a second or third or ninth chance. Recognize this time as an opportunity to start fresh, to even reinvent yourself. That job you learned to dread and the boss who made your life miserable, gone. The difficult neighbor, not your problem anymore. This is also the perfect time to make changes and seriously consider opportunities you've always wanted to pursue. Lessons are usually better understood through the lens of hindsight, not while you're slogging through difficult circumstances. None of us enjoy saying goodbye to comfortable situations, and the known is preferable to striking out and beginning again. Yet, by shifting perspective ever so slightly, life in the pause can turn out to be an unexpected gift. And here are a few more scriptures. You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you. Isaiah 26:3. And this is probably my favorite verse, this next one, our family's motto. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. So think about this. If you find yourself living in the pause right now, find an encouraging verse and write it down to remind your heart of God's goodness when times are difficult. And also think about this. What is the most difficult part of transition for you? Is it the goodbyes, making new friends, or something else entirely? Take a look at it. Pray about it. Find somebody to share about it with. And here's a prayer for us all. Dear Lord, I know you've brought me here for a reason. Though life may seem to be at a standstill, remind me that you are always moving, always working, even if it's only in the unseen reaches of my own heart. Amen. Like I said, there's no quick fix. One of the best pieces of advice, as I was growing up, my grandmother had all these little sayings. I'm sure your parents and grandparents had some too. And it was something her mother had said. And it was, if you can't change the world, you can move the furniture. And I remember growing up thinking, what does that mean? I have literally no idea what that means. Well, as I got older, I understood. My great-grandmother had been a missionary to China in the 1920s. She'd had given birth to several of her children over there. There's a story about her being in this little village and walking down the mountainside to go to the midwife while she was in labor. Like, I can't even imagine that life. They have some amazing stories. And that's who that motto came from later in life. She said to her own daughter, if you can't change the world, you can move the furniture. You can't necessarily fix things. You can't bring your spouse home from a deployment. You can't go back to where you used to live. You can't go back and get back into that friend group that you miss so much. But what can you do today? What is around you today? It may be something as literal as moving your furniture. It just may be something small. And that's the whole point. Do what you can do. Start with where you are and do something to move forward. And there are some resources on Judy Davis's episode, several episodes, where if you really are struggling and you're just not able to push forward, you do feel very alone. If you have a spouse with PTSD, any other issue like that, or just simply you don't feel like things are getting better, there are resources for you to reach out and get help. There are military family life counselors available that are free and anonymous. So that's a different story than what I'm talking about. And I don't want to belittle that at all. If you are really struggling, or if your kids are struggling, or your spouse is, please, please, please reach out to Military One Source or any of the other things that I mentioned. And again, I will link to all of those in the show notes. So I thank you so much for joining me today. I also have an article on my site called When the PCS Dust Settles, How Do You Start Over Again, with more ideas. And I really do look forward to hearing from you. Like I said, upcoming episodes, I'll have some guests. I'll have some more resources for you. There's no need for you to feel alone. There's so many in the military spouse community just waiting to welcome you with open arms. And I hope that wherever in the world this finds you, you have an amazing week, because you're amazing. Bye-bye, everybody.
Connect with Jen at jenmcdonald.net or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also purchase her book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Love the show? Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes. Until next time, have a great week.